let's take apart those little mini chords. All these 3-note chords are coming out of our C, A, G, E, and D shapes. If you can't see the chord that you're playing, what you need to do is stop, look at it, and see if you can't analyze it and make some sense out of it. It's a challenge to you to start putting together those shapes and starting to see little abbreviated versions of them. The picking pattern that I'm using is I'm going thumb, middle, index, thumb, middle, index, thumb, middle. So this is a G chord. And the reason I see it as a G chord is I see it as part of this. So just by playing any of those notes, I'm playing a G chord. Now the next chord, I put my first finger here on the first fret on the B string. And I'm calling that a C because here's a C chord, open C. And then back to that G, and back to, and that's obviously a D. Now why, on measure 5, why is that a G? Well, if you look at it, it comes straight out of that E shape. So we're going to call that a G. That's a C. Why is that a C? Here's my C, my A shape. So it's part of that A shape, really part of this A shape, right? And then, well, that's part of my D shape. And then lastly, I have a D chord here, so. Well, that was just like C. C, D. Measure 9. Jump all the way up to here. That's part of my A shape again for that E chord. Here's C, because it's part of our E shape. Back to the G. And then, now that's part of my E shape again. Moving on to measure 13. Well, that's a G chord, just those 3 notes, part of that G chord. Just we don't see it usually, but those are open. And then measure 14, that's a C chord. Measure 15, that's all just coming right out of here, right out of that shape. Measure 16, that's part of my C shape for a D chord. Measure 17, now I'm on to the chorus, so the pattern changes up, and instead of going G, C, and D, I'm starting on C. Well, that's part of either my A shape, or can be seen as part of my G shape. To D, then G, that's part of my G shape. Then I'm just going to play. Now, here's the E minor. This is something we learned in the 2 lessons ago. That's that A minor shape for the E minor. So I'm just playing those 3 notes. C, that's part of my E shape. That's a D chord, that's part of my E shape. That's part of my A shape, that's a G chord. And that's back to that D chord. On to page 2. That's just a little bit of the G chord again. That's pretty obvious as far as being a C chord, G chord, to D chord. Now all the way through measure 41, I think you can put it together. I think you can start seeing those shapes. You can see the A shape and the E shapes in there. If you have any questions about any specific measures, by all means, ask and I shall explain to you. But I'd like you to do a little bit of the analysis yourself. Moving on to measure 41, it gets a little bit complicated. So this C chord, well, that's harder to make sense of because that's actually not part of any of our shapes. What I can tell you is this top note is a G, A, E, F, F sharp, G, And we have a G within that C chord. So that's why I'm putting that together for C. That's a D chord. Again, not represented in any of our shapes, but the notes in there can be taken apart and looked at and analyzed. And you have an F sharp on the lowest note, an A string, and an open D string. So you have F sharp, A, and D, and those are in fact the notes that make up our D chord. So there they are. G is easy, and then E minor, pretty basic. You can see that. Measure 45. Well, if that's a C chord, and we understand that, if you take a shape and you understand that to be a C, then up one fret would be C sharp, and here's our D chord. So that's a D. That's measure 46. Measure 47, you can see this as part of our G chord. The G is made of a G, B, and D. And so what I have here is I have a B on that E string, a D here on the A string, and a G here on the D string. So there you go, B, D, G. B, D, G, that makes a G chord. Measure 48. Well, this is just basically your A shape with our highest note borrowed from up here and put down here. So that's why that's a D chord. Measure 49, we play D again. And that's just our G shape. And measure 50, I'm sorry, I played that wrong. Measure 50, well, that's part of our E shape. And then those last three notes for G, well, that's just our A shape again, with our highest note borrowed from up here and brought down here. Hope that makes sense to you. There's a lot to think about there, but the key is the thinking. Take it apart, analyze it, do what you can to make sense of it. If there's anything that's missing from the explanation for you, and you can't put it together, then by all means, reach out to me on patreon.com, and I will answer your questions and make sure that you understand what we're looking at. Hope you enjoyed that. You're really kicking butt if you're at this place and you're understanding it. We're moving headlong into some really cool stuff. So keep rocking. Talk to you soon.